Welcome back to another episode of the Quantum Yoga Podcast. I'm honored today to have Judith Pennington, who is the founder of the Institute for the Awakened Mind, founder of Eagle Life Communications, author of two books entitled The Voice of the Soul, Your Psychic Soul, and also a meditation CD series. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you.
Well, I love how this these connections get made, because there were sort of three triangulated points that led me to you over the course of a year, and here we are. Little did I know this is where we would end up. But I have been I have had my own sort of little minor investigation into what is going on in the brain with meditation and different types of meditation. And to get connected to you, what is so amazing is that you guys are actually using, your guys are kind of like the first technology to really embrace meditation and consciousness, rather than to use like neurofeedback and EEG for a therapeutic in a pathological context. Is that kind of safe to say?
Yeah, you absolutely put your finger on it. Back in the 1970s, C. Maxwell Cade, who was a British biophysicist and a Zen master, also a hypnosis master, he was really interested in, of course, seeing what was going on inside consciousness, because he was both a scientist and a mystic. And he, at the time, some particular transistors were developed serendipitously. Had a electronics engineer come to one of his meditation classes, and at the time he was just measuring physiology, an electrical skin response meter to measure arousal or relaxation. And Jeff Blundell and Max together invented the mind mirror, and astonishingly created a totally unique instrument that nothing like it ever existed before, and there's still nothing like it today. And what's unique about it, just to say a little bit about that, is that what they measured was the whole array of frequencies, from the beta conscious mind and the alpha sensory daydreaming awareness, which is a bridge, down into the subconscious mind of theta, still slower frequency brainwaves that most people don't have access to, except in maybe a creative aha moment or when they're meditating in their lives. And that's because theta is the storage house for long-term memory. And therefore, that's where they found creativity, insight, and spiritual awareness, those brainwaves amplifying when people were doing those kinds of meditations. And then delta, still lower and slower frequency brainwaves, which are mostly inaccessible to everyone unless they're in meditation and have that alpha bridge for access. And delta being a kind of radar that is always on. It's instinctual, it's always amplified, and kind of watching our backs. Some people who are hypervigilant have a lot of delta. Other people who are accessing their psychic awareness show delta. Healers have a lot of delta as well. And so they were measuring this array of frequencies, about which very little was known at the time. And then they were measuring the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain. So they actually had a pattern that was shaped very much like a human being. And it just turned out that way. They were measuring the back of the head, where there's little artifact, and also the temporal lobes, where there's little artifact. And this humanoid shape they found in people who were highly developed and spiritually aware, and Max called that the awakened mind, and wrote a book called The Awakened Mind, Biofeedback, and the Development of Higher States of Awareness. And so Max continued along that line, and so did his protege, Anna Wise, who worked with Max from 1974 to 1981, and then brought the technology back to the U.S. She was originally in Boulder and then moved into the San Francisco area. And everyone else who did neurofeedback, other than Elmer and Alice Green, who were working at the Menninger Institute, everyone else went the way of pathology. And so it's been the mind mirror alone that's been measuring consciousness for more than 40 years and has found out some amazing things about people and helped thousands upon thousands of people all over the world. Yeah.
So I think I read somewhere that, well, let's see, how many scans would you say have been done on with this consciousness orientation to sort of gather this philosophy and this theory that you guys have built?
Well, at the time that Max wrote his book, he had done 4,000 sessions on people, and that included his studies. He did a lot of research on healers and psychics and yogis and swamis and people who were producing this pattern, not only in meditation with their eyes closed, because that's easier, because then you have the alpha bridge when your eyes close, but also could externalize, and that's what he was teaching people to do, was to externalize that pattern into everyday life. And he called it lucid awareness at first, then the awakened mind, and today I call it creative flow and peak performance, because those are the terms that are most familiar to people. And then Anna Wise followed up with about 6,000. She measured 6,000 hours. Personally, I've certainly done 2,000-3,000 sessions on people. And then, of course, there are awakened mind practitioners who are networked through the Institute for the Awakened Mind, literally all over the world, and they're doing lots and lots of sessions too. So it's becoming, measuring the number of sessions we do is becoming immeasurable, simply because of proliferation of our numbers.
And what is your practitioner size right now?
There are about 60 practitioners. One person in Germany is training other practitioners, and I'm training here. We are moving into top of the mind recognition, partly because of transformative technologies, which awarded the Mind Mirror with that status as a transformational technology a couple of years ago, and then again last year. Partly because of our work with the Monroe Institute, but mostly because after Anna Wise passed away in 2010, I had this delightful meeting with a UK manufacturer who put the Mind Mirror on a neurofeedback biofeedback device. And so we now have so much data analysis, it's just astonishing. We have since 2011, when this Mind Mirror 6 came into being, the software has just advanced and advanced and advanced. And so now we're able to really show people much more split second what happened. Here's a average of your brainwave patterns while you were walking across the bridge, and here's where the aha happened. And you can see the coherence increasing in your brainwaves as the gamma beats, as you're listening to the gamma beats. And it's just, it's nothing different from what Max said or what Anna found. It's just that we have the data to back it up now. So that is really making a big difference for the top of the mind awareness. And also, the new Mind Mirror 6 has a self-training program, so lots of people are buying it. It's still the least expensive instrument on the market for neurofeedback by far, by thousands of dollars. We keep the price low so we can get it out to people. And it comes with a GSR for measuring physiology, which is a calibration from Max's ESR into a GSR, and then blood volume pulse sensor. So self-trainers are buying it to train physiology and train the brain. And when you have that combination, it's a lot faster, and it's all recorded right there for you to analyze the data.
Wow. Well, I'd like to maybe I didn't expect us to start there, even though that was great. I'd like to have you maybe talk about your segue, your initial segue, which is such a lovely story and a profound one into this world. If you can give that to the listeners, please.
Do you mean my personal awakening?
Yeah, yeah. Because that was sort
Ah,
of like stage one, right? And then you
yes.
went through this process of trying to basically understand what happened, as far as I could tell, and that's when the side of science filled in the gaps, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So lots of people have had experiences like the one that happened to me, but of course, to me, it was quite the big deal. And is that I was a very busy director of a peace and justice group and a freelance writer, and everything in my life, my professional life, was wonderful. But my personal life was a complete wreck because I came out of a difficult background and I had that hypervigilance and I had highly developed delta. And but my thinking mind was completely disorganized by incredible amounts of stress, not just from my work, but mostly from trying to mother two children on my own. And and I had had this experience when I was only 24 years old. And I knew that there was something extraordinary, but I didn't know what it was, and I had no way of getting to it. And I had even felt that there was something more than this material world, even when I was a child. I took myself to my little Catholic church, walked my 2 miles literally all by myself on Sundays because it was like I was outdoors, like I was in this place, this sense of the sacred, that there's something beyond the physical. When my family took us out fishing and from Louisiana, we'd sit on the bayou and just nature was really alive for me. And I found that in my little church, but then got away from that completely disillusioned. And then when I was 22, 24 years old, and the mother of a 2-year-old child, I was living in Baton Rouge, and I started having this horrible pains for 3 weeks in my lower abdomen and had no idea what it was, but it was not going away. So finally I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you need to come take these pills and come back and see me on Monday. Well, this was Friday. I saw him. And I didn't think anything about it over the weekend, but then when I was driving to the appointment on Monday morning, it suddenly dawned on me that here this doctor was seeing me on his lunch hour, so he must have found something, and I should be worried. And and so I'm driving my little Carmen Ghia down the interstate toward the appointment. It's about 20 minutes away, and I just sent up this little residual Catholic prayer from my childhood and said, I don't know if there's a God or not, but if there is, please don't let anything happen to me because I'm the only one who can take care of my daughter. And before those words finished in a sentence, I felt this ice cold chill race up my body, and then it turned super warm and delicious, and my body just blew into this incredible sensation of joy. And I didn't, I thought, well, this is weird. And then it kept going, and then it intensified, and it got stronger and stronger. And suddenly I felt myself, I don't know if I flipped behind my body and was looking at my body from behind or what, but I looked down at my hands, and I didn't have any, those weren't my hands. I wasn't in my hands anymore driving that car. And then I could feel tears running down my eyes, and I just threw my head back and looked in the rearview mirror, and I was just in this bliss state. Uh, I would say that it's indescribable, but it's really not indescribable. It's a union and a spontaneous inflow of energy and information. And I knew then that there was no such thing as death, that when we change state, we're only changing state, and there was never anything to be afraid of in all of life. No one had anything to be afraid of, and that this feeling was available at all times to anyone, that it was just about connecting, just about making a connection and knowing that there's something that energy is out there. And I hadn't felt anything like this when I was sitting in my church as a 9-year-old, or sitting in nature. I just had a certain amount of peace and relaxation. But this was completely different. This was like I'd stuck my finger in in an electric socket, and something would wah, 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 like that. And in subsequent years, so the feeling faded. I saw my exit coming up on the interstate, and the feeling began to fade, and I felt my awareness moving back into my hands. And I was still high as a kite. Things were not like they had looked before. But I steered off, and I went home, and I got ready for the doctor's appointment, went to the doctor. The doctor examined me and said, well, I found a tumor the size of an orange, or maybe it was a lemon, I don't remember now. And he said, but it's gone now. It must have been the medicine I gave you. And I thought, nope, it was not your medicine. And in fact, I had still a lot of pain until that happened that morning. And I didn't know what to make of it. It was just completely inscrutable to me. By then, I didn't believe that there was some kind of benevolent force in the universe. I was a very angry person. I was angry at organized religion. I said, you've just totally destroyed the world, destroyed indigenous cultures. You've made people believe crazy things. They're all carrying around this guilt. And I didn't know what to do with any of it. And if anything, it was more confusing, but there was a part of me that said, there's something that was real. I could never deny or doubt or disbelieve that, because I could remember what it felt like, see. I could almost arouse it just by thinking about it. But I didn't know whether it was inside me or outside me. At that time, I was still thinking in either or and never both and. And it wasn't until 15 years later that I was being my peace group person and working crazy hours and a freelance writer and trying to take care of my, by then, much older daughters, 16 and 8 years old, all by myself as usual. And I wrote this story about this woman who was a welfare advocate, smart woman. Her name, she's probably passed away now. Annie Smart was her name. And she had touched me so deeply. And when I was writing the article, I could feel my senses come alive and it was a very visual article, and I could feel my heart, stirring with love for this woman. And I knew that when people read this article in the daily newspaper, they were going to have the same experience, a real awakening. So I finished the story on Annie and started pacing around in my bedroom. It was about 2 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, but it was really late. And I could feel the drag of sleep. You know how you feel it on the back of your head? But I was just really ramped up in consciousness. And I had this feeling that I should sit down and pick up pen and paper and just listen. And I had done some stories for the local newspaper by then on yoga and hot yoga and isolation tanks and things like that. And it seemed like that I was having the experience at times, especially in the isolation tank, where thoughts just completely shut down. No more thinking, no mind chatter. I'd been astonished at how much mind chatter I heard in that isolation tank. But I was still really working on deadlines, all these marches, organizing, taking care of my kids. I was still rocking and rolling. But I was starting to realize that there is a way to listen. And so when I heard that or felt it, I sat down with pen and paper and I just listened in the same way that I would listen to someone that I was interviewing for an article, put myself completely away, out of the way, and just wrote down what I heard. And by the end of the second paragraph, I feel different. And I could feel streams of energy moving in my body from head to toe. It was very quiet, not like that big interstate healing experience. But I read what I had written, and it was the most incredible wisdom. Nothing like I had access to in my conscious awareness. And I thought, what is this, like a dead person? And then I thought, I've interviewed some psychics, and I don't know if the people on the other side know any more than we do. I shouldn't listen to a dead person. But the wisdom was so beautiful, and the writing was so lyrical. It was clearly from some higher state of awareness where ideas and information are synthesized into a whole and then placed into metaphors and transmission of universal laws. And I said, wow. The next night I went, I'm going to try this again. And then it was a whole page. And 12 years later, I had this incredible sheaf of meditative writings that had taught me how to trust again, and to forgive, and to love, and to, most of all, to love myself, because I'd had such a chaotic life. I didn't love myself at all. And how to be a better mother to my children. And the writings had led me into an Edgar Cayce study group where I met with 7 people for a period of 10 years on a weekly basis. And then we were studying spiritual laws. And by then I had become a regular meditator. Part of the Cayce work, first chapter in the text is meditation. The last chapter in the second volume is meditation. So, and then I realized I had been meditating all along. And when I was doing the meditative writings. But then when I was doing nothing and was just sitting in silence, and it just came so natural because I had such a head start, I could almost get to the feelings of that healing state from so many years before. And sometimes I would have energy move in my back, and then my back trouble from car wrecks would disappear. So things were really happening. And so my meditative writing started to say, they've been saying all along that I was going to share this with the world. And I'm going, no, I'm terrified of people. I can't even speak out loud. Just forget that. That's just not happening. And, but as the years passed, I became so much calmer and so much better capable of communicating with people. I came out from behind and landed in the earth, I guess. All the trauma was gone. All the fears were gone. And I said, okay, well, what I'll do is just write this book, The Voice of the Soul. I knew what the title was, and I'll put the meditative writings in it because they're universal. And so I sent them off to an editor, and the editor says, no, you have to share your story. And I went, that's not going to happen, because all my writing thus far had never had the word I in it. And to make that switch, that's huge. Suddenly you're writing about yourself. And then I thought about it and said, you know, if people can't see the transformation in me, it's not going to make as much sense. All literature has to see transformation. So I went to Virginia Beach and sat down at the Edgar Cayce, stayed in a beautiful little apartment right on the beach, only a few blocks from the Edgar Cayce Center. And sometimes I would go listen to Cayce lectures, but for the most part, I spent a solid month in that apartment. I went to the beach twice, and that made the way into the book. And I just wrote my story as honestly as I could with the help of journals and the meditative writings themselves. And then I would have to meditate when I didn't understand that. And if you've ever written a spiritual autobiography, you know that this is where you clean everything up, because when it goes down on the page and it feels a little bumpy, you're having trouble with the language, you can't express it, well, that's your sign that something's unresolved. And so then you go into meditation, you go, oh, I see that. So it's a growth process in itself. And but then still I got to the end of the narrative, and when it was time to go back home, I was going to go to drive back down to Louisiana and then go meet my husband. And he was at, I I think he was at he was at Oxford for the summer, and he's a mathematician, so he was working there. And I had the blessing of a free trip to the Fenton Foundation. So the idea was to go drive back to Louisiana and then almost immediately fly away. And I looked at this narrative and said, I'm not publishing this unless I have some scientific proof, because everybody's got a story. Everybody has some wonderful spiritual awakening. Without some kind of scientific confirmation to put in this book, to add to this book, then I'm just another person saying, hey, if you meditate, you're going to have a spiritual awakening. You're going to calm down. You're going to feel healthier. All of your problems are going to be solved. It's too unbelievable. And so I just said that's my bottom line. And almost immediately, I heard very clearly a voice say, go to the ARE bookstore and look for Common Boundary magazine. Well, Common Boundary is, if you've heard of it, it's dedicated to art, spirituality, and creativity. And I had written for Common Boundary before and knew that it's not in just every bookstore, but I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll go and look at it. Go to ARE bookstore, look for Common Boundary magazine. About the third time that happened, while I was packing to go back to Louisiana, I went, okay. And so I went, and sure enough, on the cover of Common Boundary magazine, which they were carrying, was a headline that said, The Brainwaves of Healing. And I knew that was it. And I picked it up, threw it in my suitcase, started driving down, got halfway down into the Smoky Mountains, and spent the night there and picked up this article, which was an interview with Anna Wise. And I wasn't 2 paragraphs into it, and I just threw the thing up in the air and went, that's the proof. This is going to be all the proof of everything I've written. So from then on, all of my experiences in life started to fold into the book, because then I had a map of consciousness that I could use to interpret the experiences. And it even continued past Anna's work. Well, I very quickly obtained her book and started reading her book and just wrote everywhere and said, this is true. This is exactly what happens. Because, see, I'd already been through the awakening experience through the meditative writings. So I not only understood what she was saying, I understood it from the inside. Mm-hmm. And on multiple levels. And so I wrote her an email and said, boy, I really get this. And I told her a paragraph or 2 of my story. She wrote back and said, you need to come study with me. And you get this in a way that most people don't. And I went, that's never going to happen. I've got this book out now. I'm doing workshops. But I started using her brainwave map of consciousness in the workshops. Everything. Dream interpretation, intuition development, meditation, the path to enlightenment. And everybody could get it, could understand, and then navigate that map of consciousness, you see, by having a reference point. It's like, if you know where you are, it's very easy to see where you've been and where you're going to go and how to get there. And then I even had the second and third proofs that went into the book that kept folding in. And this was an astrophysicist in Scotland who I found out about and read his, and it was absolutely true. I even sent his science to Barbara Brennan, and she was very excited about it. And so I published the book, kept teaching and everything. And that was in 1999. And 2001, I kept feeling like I should go and connect with Anna, because I was asking permission to use this page from her book or this chart, and she'd say, yeah, but you need to come study with me. She was always on her way to Esalen, you know. Mm-hmm. And she but I couldn't. It was too expensive. I mean, I was doing these $20 a person workshops at Unity churches and community colleges, and it was going to cost $18,000 to go study with her by the time I bought the equipment, bought a laptop, you know, traveled out from, by then I was on the East Coast up here in Pennsylvania, all the way to her in Berkeley. And I kept saying, no. But I did go to a workshop of hers at Esalen And it was actually the week before 9/11. I had some phenomenal, weird 9/11 experiences afterward, which saved it for a rainy day. But immediately I understood that that this was infallible, that the science, the brainwave patterns, and their match to people's inner states of consciousness and their experiences always matched. People would go around the room, and 8 of the 24 would be hooked up. That people would take turns being hooked up. And when I was hooked up, one time she was doing a meditation, and I felt myself start to slip away. But I knew that if I sharpened my sensory imagery, my sensualization skill, that would amplify the alpha. And sure enough, the drawing showed me losing my alpha and then powering up the alpha exactly when I remembered having done that. So to the finest nuances, this was true. And then it really was proved to me when she did a Kundalini meditation, and the same thing happened in that she was leading this meditation, and I hit this place in meditation where I'm in this luminous field, and there's nothing but this field of bliss, and nothing matters but being here, and her voice faded away. And sure enough, the drawings were of huge evolved mind flares that are beyond the awakened mind pattern. That's a union with your spirit, with your essential being, with the quantum field. But still, I kept thinking, $18,000, it's just not going to happen. But then my meditative writings in 2005 started to prompt me and kept saying, consider. Never before had they directed me so strongly. It was always before something important is going to happen, and the meditation abilities will strengthen and grow more profound. And then I ran into the Edgar Cayce work. It was always generalizations. It was never, this is something you need to look at, of course, in much more beautiful language than that. And so I kept arguing, and the meditative writings kept going on and saying there are things you don't know. And I finally gave up and said, well, I'll go for just one of the 6 seminars. And when I got there, Anna had moved from a cane, she had multiple sclerosis, into a wheelchair. And the moment I walked into the room, I went, oh, I'm supposed to pick up the work. And then I very quickly went, oh, that's just my ego speaking. Knocked that little thought right out of my head. And Anna said, you have to stay for all of them, or you can't stay for any of them. So I scribbled furiously with my meditative writings, hours and hours each night. And I finally came to grips with, this is the most important work in the world. It wakes people up to who they really are. On a level most people don't have access to. It helps them get in touch with creative insights that resolve every question, every issue, every challenge. And it's so empowering because it's leading you not only to your own essential being, but to everything that's needed for you to increase the love within you. And you begin to radiate that, and synchronicities grow more powerful in your life, and you start living in a flow state. And every time I would go out to train with Anna, I would start getting so excited, and I had to learn to tamp that down, you know. And after I was certified, I assisted her for 4 years at Esalen. We'd go there 3 and 4 times a year. And then she did pass away, and it just absolutely broke my heart. But there was nobody who had the organizational skills. Dare I say it, I'm a Capricorn with a lot of Virgo, which means that I'm extraordinarily organized. So networking everyone into the Institute for the Awakened Mind, starting the practitioner training program, developing the mind mirror, it just all came so naturally to me. And training people has been even more awakening. I've met the most amazing people, done the most amazing research on healers. And now with this highly advanced software, we're looking at gamma. We've been studying, we can measure up to 100 hertz on a mind mirror. So it's just
can we go there now? Can we talk about frequencies and
yes.
give some people an idea here of how this map connects to brainwave states?
Sure. Well, when people are in a state of consciousness, like we both are right now, there's something going between us, you know. If you say something to me that relates to something in my life and I go, aha, oh, I get it. That moment of insight is the awakened mind pattern. So that's what we are, with the mind mirror, electrodes attached to them, are training people to access that state. And it's really not hard at all once you understand how to quiet the beta brain waves of the thinking mind, which most people don't know because everybody's dealing with ordinary random thinking, beta. So I'm showing you the head, my head, and the head of the humanoid-shaped brainwave pattern. Random beta has got about this much amplitude and no alpha because your eyes are open, which means your connection to your deeper self is just not there if you're sitting there thinking about, do I take this turn? And if you speed your brain up to be able to make a list or a decision, beta increases in amplitude, still no alpha. Now, of course, if you're having some aha, well, then your beta is going to decrease and your alpha is going to increase, and you've had that sudden moment of insight. But typically people go from random thinking to list making and decision making to high frequency stress, anxiety, and panic. And then there's no chance of connecting with your deeper self because alpha's blocked. And chances are your theta is flat because you're shrinking inside yourself. So there's no connection with the essential being. I mean, that's where I was for many years with no idea how to do anything about it until my meditative writing started. But when they started, just listening to what I was hearing was having the effect on me, especially because the meditative writings were just pure poetry, extremely lyrical, and that heightened my sensory awareness, which is what's happening in alpha. Alpha is 8 to 14 hertz, which are the frequencies of nature. So if you walk out in nature, this is why people relax, you know, when they notice the color of a leaf, the texture, the shape. Listen to bird song, watch a sunset, all of those things amplify alpha and reduce beta at the same time. And once you have the alpha bridge, you know how it goes. You're walking in nature and you go, oh, well, that was the solution. That's because now you have access to theta. Theta can amplify it. So alpha and theta taken together, just those two, relaxed, diffused state of awareness, plus access to the material of the mind, that is meditation. So it's really not that hard. The trick is to get the alpha to get the beta to reduce, so you have access to the alpha. Most people have a lot of alpha when they close their eyes, but it's not stable because it's not trained. And then there are always issues in the subconscious mind, which can cause alpha to flare in and out. Oh, I'm afraid. The ego up in beta says, oh, I don't know where we're going. Okay. Nope. Okay. Nope. And, but once you meditate, either by yourself in silent meditation, or you go out in nature and you amplify that and stabilize that alpha, or best come to an awakened mind practitioner and have them hook you up and find out how your alpha is doing and help you stabilize it, then you really have more consistent access to that alpha theta meditation state, and everything calms down. I mean, the physiology calms down, the brain balances when you access theta, the balanced brain connects with the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system, and everything in the body starts to optimize so that the body starts to heal itself. Suddenly you don't have all this noise and static with the brain fighting itself, not having flow between the frequencies, because they're really operating right here from the front, the lowest and slowest. And once you have access to theta, well, you have way more access to delta. So all of your issues are in your long-term memories in theta. Not saying they're just in the brain, but saying that when you access theta frequencies, wherever those memories are stored, whether it's cellular or whether it's in your field, that's when you're able to access them. But there's also where your essential being is located. So when you're down there from 8 to 4 hertz in your theta waves, you have your issues and you have your essential being. And you just look at things, you said an image pops up, and with a little bit of training, you can learn a few questions to just ask that image. Say, how long have you been there? What are you about? Why have you separated out? Why are you making me feel, let's take an example, why do I feel unworthy? When did that start? How long has that happened? And is that the truth? Because then the essential being's asking really good questions. Is that the truth? And then the issue says, well, no, I'm good in some ways. And then the dialogue goes on. And the next thing you know, the issue gives up its separation, which is exactly what this is all about, is self-separation, right? And then, and the essential being promises to take care of what the part thought that it was doing to protect you, because there's always some positive purpose. And the part disappears. And ultimately your theta amplifies and gives you still more connection to your delta. And sometimes you're not working entirely with your essential being. Sometimes energy and information move from the quantum field into your delta, and your delta turns up. Normally your delta is splayed out, searching, anticipating, or healing, sending energy out to heal someone else. But when energy and information come from the field and that delta upturns and the information starts to flow all the way into higher frequencies of awareness, well, that's when you get that evolved mind pattern of union. So there's the very act of getting insights, even if all you want is a creative insight to a work challenge, even if you're not going to heal some trauma or some pain inside you, it's still getting the flow of information from the field, from your essential being, up into your alpha, and all of that is transforming beta. Everybody disses on the, that's an old-fashioned word, diss, but everyone does on the ego. Oh, the ego is bad. The poor ego is nothing but a white knight trying to protect us from what it perceives as dangers in the outer world. But the ego is transformed, because once it connects with the deeper mind in theta and the universal consciousness in the delta unconscious mind, well, it knows it's not alone. And so the first thing it says was, okay, well, what then is the better way to do this? And then it gets higher perspectives. So then the ego starts to become super conscious. And the effect of that is an amplification of high beta into gamma frequencies. And so that was one of the first things I included in the Mind Mirror of 6. Let's see 2 bars of gamma, because I'd been seeing high beta amplified in people who were not stressed or panicked, and instead up in the 30 to 44 hertz, which is what we were measuring before, they were telling me that they were resolving all their issues with their dead husband, or they were having an out-of-body experience or something like that. So I said, well, let's look at some more gamma up to 64 hertz. So now we have a gamma synchrony pattern, and healers, psychics, people who are extremely, done a lot of inner work through meditation, extremely evolved people are producing an integrated gamma pattern that I call superconscious, because they're walking around there having around the world with their eyes open, with their alpha, with their gamma integrated, with this beautiful theta, perfect access to themselves, the ability to self-heal, the ability to heal others through their actions and their compassion. And gamma is associated with exactly that, 30 to 100 hertz. Love, compassion, a lot of spontaneous insights, a lot of aha insights, the inflow of insights, and most importantly, whole brain synchrony. We haven't been able to, and it's way too expensive to, if anybody listening wants to volunteer to help with this, we would love to get a situation where we could look at all 4 lobes of the brain when people are producing an awakened mind pattern, where maybe we're going to get to do that with the 19-channel Loretta, which is not inaccessible, but we would love to develop something that would allow us to look at brainwaves inside of a functional MRI, which would be stunning. What we believe is that the awakened mind pattern is whole brain synchrony. We know that the evolved mind is whole brain synchrony because there's nothing but unity happening then. But gamma synchrony, as we call it, as I named it, when it's got those gamma waves in there, it is definitely those high frequencies. And from studies at the Monroe Institute, I can tell you that we're looking at coherence increasing, at least in the back and on the sides of the brain, when the gamma frequencies are occurring. And that's what coherence is. It's increased symmetry in both sides of the brain, so that at a certain point of coherence, then what you run into is synchronization of all 4 lobes of the brain, so that the brain powers up and creates more brain cells here in the frontal lobes, which gives you a greater capacity for an intelligence, and also additional neurons grow in the new neurons form in the hippocampus, which is memory storage and retrieval. Frontal lobes are also creativity. So we are really looking at this gamma, and especially over the past more than a year at the Monroe Institute, where we've been hooking up 16 and in December 20 people simultaneously, and they're in this this big training room and laying back on these anti-gravity chairs, listening to binaural beats, these high-frequency gamma beats that they've managed through spatial angle modulation technology called SAM to deliver, so that it doesn't bother you to listen to the gamma. A lot of people have bad reactions to gamma, but TMI, the Monroe Institute, has developed a technology where you just fly. Boy, you're rising, you're listening to 40 hertz coherence gamma, then 80 hertz, and then 120 hertz. And people are flying out of their bodies and traveling like drones around a target that's in a box on top of a rafter, and coming back and accurately reporting what was in the box. And so measuring up to 100 hertz, this is totally pioneering work that we're doing now. Like 4 people, 5 people soon measure each of 4 people. So that's how we get 16 and 20 people. And they're watching their brain waves. And it's just over a period of 5 days. So you're really getting a lot of data. So that's going to all be published data. Finally, we will get some mind mirror data published. And also, I have a program that's starting up in December, and I'll only do 1 remote viewing and 1 out of body, but this one's going to be strictly on gamma territory. You know, the body matrix. I just finished writing and recording those meditations, connecting with the matrix, connecting with the field, moving energy, healing stuff on your own, going to a forest and meeting a wise one and integrating with that higher self that gives you tons of information. So it's like awakened mind meditation, but with gamma on top, which makes it super conscious. So I'm calling it the super conscious mind, and starts in December, and we're going to have 2 programs next year on that, and then 2 programs in addition that I won't be leading, that they'll be leading their discovery programs, which is all RV and OBE remote viewing and out of body. So we're gathering tons of data that's all going to be published in journals. There's an affiliation between TMI and the University of Virginia, the Department of Perceptual Studies, where Ian Stevenson came from, and they've got some tons of great equipment, and one of their researchers is with TMI as well. So we're just doing the most fascinating stuff, and it's really frequency based. I mean, it is about frequencies. If you've got access to higher frequencies, the bottom line is that those higher frequencies, if you're having a good experience, are stabilizing your awakened mind pattern, stabilizing your evolved mind pattern, and you walk away able to sustain and maintain those states of consciousness much faster. And I've even seen people who came for like the June program and then came back in December, and their statistical scores are way higher. So we're seeing lasting change as well.
What do you see happening with the delta and the theta with all of this gamma going on?
Stabilization for one thing, but also amplitude increases.
And so is it your understanding that the gamma is riding off of these very low frequencies, as has been told to me from some other people who are kind of exploring? Gamma is sort of the hot topic, right? Everybody's like,
very hot topic.
Yeah.
Well, it's different for different people. I mean, brainwaves are as individual as a fingerprint. There are people who are at the TMI programs or come here to train with me who are mediums, and they're accessing extraordinary states of consciousness, and it's all in the bottom of the pattern in theta and delta. And you might see a little bitty increase in gamma to show you that it's riding on the theta or the delta. It's sometimes it's the theta, sometimes it's the delta, sometimes it's the two combined. And then someone else will have the same quality of extraordinary experiences, and their theta will be highly compressed. And in fact, there's less theta in the gamma synchrony pattern than there is in the awakened mind, because that's what I saw when the concentration of consciousness moves up into at least 64 hertz gamma. Then theta decreases simply because now it's all up here, and it's not so much down in the self-discovery brainwaves of theta. It's up here instead. So what we've seen is just it vary, and not just me. Other people are seeing very great variability as well. Another medium can come in here, and she's an absolute gamma with very little theta. So it just depends on the people. Maybe it's about their meditation practices. Maybe it's about where they're comfortable. I'll tell you one thing. I saw this woman at TMI in a June program called Journey to Happiness. And she had this gorgeous awakened mind pattern with tons of theta, tons of delta, super, super stable alpha, and almost nothing up here in her beta and her gamma. And as the program continued, well, her gamma started to develop, but then she would come back to ordinary consciousness and it would decrease. And so she came to, I saw her next at a conference that TMI has. They wanted me to present the results from the June Journey to Happiness program, which, by the way, is online. Anybody is welcome to watch that. It's absolutely fascinating. It's on YouTube. And so during the conference, she had an injury in her knee, and she had stem cell implants, and she was walking on ski poles. And I kept feeling like, gosh, we need to get some healers. There are bound to be some healers here, or maybe I'll just work with it myself. But I was moving, rocking and rolling the whole week. Suddenly everybody wanted sessions, and I couldn't seem to organize it. And then one day I said, we're going to have to get some healer working on Felice. She doesn't mind my telling you. There's a study on her. It's going to be online soon too. And this woman said, "Oh, well, there's a really great healer here." So we hooked them up simultaneously while he was working on her, and you could absolutely see the split second when the healing took place. And they both reported knowing that that's when the healing took place. And this woman rose from that minimal beta, gamma, and by then she, was kind of, at first she was just like not thinking about what she was doing, so her alpha was flaring in and out. And then her alpha starts to stabilize as she starts to connect with the healer. And she starts to blow into this gamma, and her gamma matches his gamma, which is a common thing. You'll have brainwave entrainment, and he had a ton of right brain gamma. I mean, just like out here. The whole time he was healing her. Well, she started to pick up that gamma. And then she decided she wanted to do this work, and came to study with me to be a practitioner. And I hooked her up, and she still had all the gamma. And she still got the gamma today. I was with her last month in France. We had a training in Lyon, and she came for that training. That gamma stuck with her, and she feels it. And she is just rocking and rolling through life with all kinds of plans, and some of which relate to the mind mirror. So the gamma not only is known for neurogenesis, for the creation of new brainwave cells, it's known for neuroplasticity, so that it is rewiring neural circuits. So Felice was a classic case of that. It rewired her to gamma, and she maintained the gamma. It's fabulous.
Wow. So you have a few different sort of states of consciousness that you have maps essentially for. And you mentioned the awakened mind, the involved mind. Are there others?
Well, the gamma synchrony was one that I mentioned before, that you see in a lot of healers and advanced meditators, mediums, psychics, and people who have meditated for a long time and have learned by going to the slow frequencies to have that gamma start to appear and ride for them. So the three patterns, those three patterns are the main ones we look at. But then meditation was the pattern with it's an awakened mind with no beta. So that's silent meditation. That's another one. We don't look at it in studies because you're creative problem solving, or you're listening to gamma, something's going to activate the beta, so you're not going to see flat beta there. But there was another pattern. So I called the gamma synchrony pattern the superconscious mind, because it is totally superconscious. But I knew, and I wrote about this in my Psychic Soul book, that there was another state of consciousness that is where you don't have the separation between the categories beta, alpha, theta, delta, and gamma. As in, the awakened mind goes to the evolved mind circle, and that self-separation between the categories disappears. And then, but you can't maintain that. As soon as you open your eyes, well, you're going to go back into the self-separation, because you have to navigate the outer world. But the gamma synchrony, I knew that superconscious state does sustain. I knew it could, and it does sustain in some people. But I knew that there had to be another state that was the evolved mind pattern with gamma frequencies on top of it. At the time, the drawings I have in the Psychic Soul book have been updated, because what happened was, once we got the 64 hertz and then the 100 hertz, we could see what that pattern really looks like. And it turns out that universal consciousness is just a gamma inclusive evolved mind pattern. And so it's a field connection from the top and from the bottom, all operating in higher frequencies. You can't bring that out either, because at that point, that's probably what happened to me on the interstate during my healing, because the higher frequencies were so palpable. And I don't do a lot of self-training, but I still meditate on a regular basis. And I have hooked myself up and looked. And when I'm feeling those energy flows, that kind of expansion, the purple eye in the forehead, that's beyond that pulsating eye. High pitches singing in my ears, my body's vibrating. That's not the mind mirror frequencies we were looking at before. That's happening. Those are higher frequencies. You can just see the gamma rising right up in the summary window, and the coherence rising up too.
Mm.
So yeah,
And this is a pretty highly aroused state as well. I mean, if you were right, I mean, which is vastly different than the kind of quiet meditation state that you were mentioning before. And so I would just assume that you would see, because you have biofeedback integrated with this. So when you're looking at the pulse and you're looking at GSR, are you seeing high arousal?
That's a brilliant question. Yes, absolutely. In some people, the GSR, state 6 on the GSR is an awakened or an evolved mind state. And when people hit that gamma, either the GSR starts to drop toward arousal, but you're looking at their brainwaves and you're going, oh, no, they're not arousing. It's the body that is arousing. So it's either the GSR or the heart rate. And the heart rate, I've seen the heartbeat go up 10 beats a minute. 10, 12, 15 beats a minute. It's really extraordinary. And but the temperature goes up. Wait, did it? Let me think about that a second. No, the temperature kept going up on the temperature sensor. That continued to rise. So you're looking at the temp sensor and so on. Well, they're in meditation, and you're looking at the GSR and heart rate going, yeah, they're in meditation. So this is gamma. Wow. I'm already looking at the gamma, so I'm seeing the gamma. So yeah, it's amazing. And so for some people, they don't want the gamma because of that arousal. You have to go and really ground yourself afterward. It's hard to take that out of meditation, but I don't even like the gamma. I like the gamma in meditation, but sometimes people come here to train and they're these heavy duty gamma producers, and I spend the whole training just trying to run, roots out of the bottoms of my feet and just trying to ground, because it's very diffused. Your consciousness is highly diffused. You become super expanded, and trying to draw brain waves and lead a meditation while you're super expanded. Ooh, it's not so easy.
Right. I wonder, we're getting kind of close to the end here. I wonder if you've seen population trends over time, and if you can speak to that.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I measured probably 500 people before the Mind Mirror 6, and it was very rare that I saw, or Anna or Max saw any activity, any amplification of the 2 top bars, which were the gamma frequencies in the mind mirror. It was extremely rare. And Max measured all those healers, and Anna did too. They were seeing all the activity down in Delta. And Anna told me when I trained with her that she had seen a difference from Max's time, that she was seeing more evolved mind patterns then in her time than Max had seen as his. He didn't even pay that much attention to the evolved mind in his book. But then since Anna's time, I've seen way more evolved mind patterns. It's not uncommon for people to close their eyes and to see an awakened mind pattern, not necessarily a stable one, almost never a stable one, but the awakened mind pattern just flares out now. And all these gamma frequencies, they weren't seeing them, and we sure as heck are. And this mind mirror is the same mind mirror they were using, except it's got higher frequencies in it. And so definitely. And also the quality of people. I mean, you're seeing yoga centers on every corner now. You're seeing people much more interested in this. Science is proving it, just as the mind mirror is proving it. So is every I don't know how many of them, but any quantum physicist interested in consciousness, or in Andrew Newberg's case, radiologists interested in consciousness, they're jamming people in these machines.
Yeah.
There are so many studies out now, and people are taking notice. So before you would say meditation, people go, Now they're going, oh, you meditate. I've always wanted to try that. It's a mass shift in consciousness. We are absolutely riding the crest of a wave of expansion in people. Oprah helped by bringing, Gary, what's his name, on the soul guy, Zukov, onto her program. You see it everywhere nowadays. Everybody wants to be super conscious. All these movies that we've had since TV came out, since movies came out, why do we have Superman? Because people know at some point, somewhere inside themselves, that this is possible. And now they know how it's possible. And it's simply through meditation and brainwave entrainment and mind expansion. And I saw you had Dawson Church on the program. EFT, Joe Dispenza, he is totally laying out in his Becoming Supernatural the entire pathway. And it's exactly our pathway. I was with him in France, both him and Dawson in France as well, at this energy psychology conference. And boy, we don't disagree on anything. I mean, we are totally agreed on everything. People read them, they see all the videos on YouTube. And if you can convince people of an objective reality, then they'll buy into it. But there's a right alongside that desire to become super conscious, there's a skeptic in us that goes, I'm going to watch TV and eat this donut.
You've got in addition to the Monroe Institute program that you mentioned earlier, you've also got something at the Omega Institute coming up in September. Tell listeners about that.
Yes, thank you for that. So this would be my first time at Omega. Actually, Dawson Church brought me in last year for a program to pinch hit for a speaker. And I just really love the beautiful, beautiful campus, the lake and the hiking trails and the consciousness there. Of course, Omega's been around a really long time. They're one of the largest, besides Esalen, they are the central human potential center in the United States. And although the ARE, you could say something about them too, Edgar Casey's ARE. But this program is very dear to my heart. It's called, they named it Wisdom Through Meditation, but you could say Wisdom Through Brainwave Meditation and etc. to be a little bit more accurate. It's dear to my heart because, as I've said on this program, what's important to me is to help people connect with their inner wellspring of wisdom and be able to draw up what they need to be able to have a happier and more joyful and fulfilled life. So this really goes back to my roots. It has all the brainwave stuff. We're going to hook people up, look at their patterns. They're going to meditate and everything. We're also going to do some sacred singing. I'm bringing my guitar and my zither. We're going to do some chanting, and we're going to have a section on conflict resolution, because if you don't understand peaceful conflict resolution, you're just going to go out and get in a fight with somebody and lose your alpha and go into high beta. It's just going to be a little module, but it's going to teach people what causes the winds of conflict, what are the ego structures involved in it. And then another one is going to be on dream interpretation, because we're asleep for 8-9 hours a night, and that's all wasted if you don't wake up and write some of those dreams down. Remote viewing tells us that the most important dream is happening an hour before you wake up. And if you can just lay there and keep your alpha stable long enough to draw up the dream fragments and write them down in a journal, then that's a meditation. And also, when you do lucid dreaming, that is an awakened mind pattern. So you can actually train your brainwaves for higher states of consciousness while you're dreaming. So between the music, the nature, the hikes, the externalization of the awakened mind through the hikes in nature, and the brainwave training, is going to be a spectacular week. I just hope listeners will come. I can promise you, as we would say in Louisiana, laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. That's what we're doing on this program.
Thank you, Judith. We'll make sure to get the links to those up on the show notes. And wow, keep up the amazing work.
Thank you so incredibly much. I've so enjoyed speaking with you. You really have a vast knowledge of everything yourself, which comes out in the lovely questions you ask. Thank you for that too.